On the night of December 7th, 1942, 4 men kneel in the freezing dark of a canvas canoe, paddles biting silently into the black water of the Gironde estuary. Behind them, the submarine that carried them across the Bay of Biscay has already slipped beneath the surface, leaving them utterly alone on enemy water. Ahead lies 60 miles of hostile river, German patrol boats, searchlights, and the heavily fortified port of Bordeaux. They carry no radio, they carry no support. They carry 9 pounds of plastic explosive apiece, strapped into limpet mines designed to cling to a ship's hull and wait. These are Major Herbert Blondie Hasler and Marine Bill Sparks in one canoe, codenamed Catfish, and Lieutenant John McKinnon and Marine James Conway in another, Crayfish. 2 other canoes had launched alongside them that night and were already gone, swallowed by the estuary's vicious tidal races. A 5th man never even made it off the submarine, his canoe torn open on the hatch before he could begin. For the next 3 days, these 4 men will travel only by darkness, hiding by daylight in reed beds and mudflats within sight of German positions, barely daring to move, eating cold rations, watching enemy barges pass within meters of their hiding places. They are attempting something no one has tried before, to penetrate one of the most heavily defended harbours in occupied Europe using nothing but folding kayaks, and to cripple Hitler's Atlantic supply line from the inside. What happens when they finally reach Bordeaux will become one of the most audacious special forces raids of the entire war, and a textbook lesson in what a handful of determined men, armed with little more than nerve and ingenuity, can achieve against impossible odds. By the autumn of 1942, Britain faced a problem with no conventional solution. The port of Bordeaux, 60 miles inland along the winding Gironde River, had become one of the most valuable links in Germany's war machine. German and Italian blockade runners slipped in and out of its docks, carrying rubber, tungsten, and other raw materials desperately needed by the Axis war effort, much of it shipped from Japanese-controlled territory in the Far East. Between June 1941 and June 1942 alone, an estimated 25,000 tons of crude rubber passed through this single port, material that fed directly into German tank production, aircraft manufacture, and military equipment of every kind. The obvious solution was to bomb it. RAF Bomber Command had the aircraft and the explosives. But Bordeaux's harbour facilities lay in the heart of a densely populated French city, and Britain's strategic bombing in 1942 was nowhere near precise enough to hit dockside warehouses without levelling civilian streets around them. Killing hundreds of French citizens to damage a handful of ships was politically and morally unthinkable, particularly when France remained, however uneasily, an occupied ally rather than an enemy nation. A naval assault was equally hopeless. Bordeaux was protected by no fewer than 32 German naval vessels, patrolling the river and its approaches, alongside coastal batteries, anti-aircraft positions, and harbour defences specifically designed to repel exactly this kind of attack. Sending surface ships or even submarines up 60 miles of narrow, shallow, heavily watched river would have been close to suicidal and almost certainly unsuccessful before the first shot was fired. This left Combined Operations, the branch of the British military, tasked with raids and special operations, searching for an entirely different kind of weapon. The inspiration, oddly enough, came from the enemy camp. In December 1941, Italian frogmen riding modified torpedoes had slipped into Alexandria harbour and crippled 2 Royal Navy battleships, HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Valiant, using nothing but stealth and explosive charges attached directly to the hulls. Winston Churchill, furious and impressed in equal measure, demanded that Britain develop something comparable. The answer would not be torpedoes or frogmen, but something far stranger: men in collapsible canvas kayaks, the kind a family might use on a quiet lake, transformed into instruments of sabotage. The unit given this task was the Royal Marines Boom Patrol Detachment, formed at Portsmouth in July 1942 and commanded by Major Herbert Blondie Hasler, a Royal Marines officer with a reputation for stubborn ingenuity and an unconventional mind. Hasler's detachment trained at Lump's Fort on the Hampshire coast, practicing night paddling, silent approach techniques, and the handling of a remarkable new piece of equipment: the Cockleshell Mark II, a 2-man folding kayak roughly 17 feet long, built from a wooden frame covered in waterproofed canvas, designed specifically so it could be broken down, stowed inside the cramped torpedo compartment of a submarine, and reassembled on deck within minutes. The limpet mine itself was the real technical marvel. Roughly the size and weight of a large dinner plate, each mine contained around 9 pounds of plastic explosive and was held against a ship's steel hull using powerful magnets, similar in principle to the magnets used on a refrigerator door, but vastly more powerful, strong enough to grip through marine growth and resist the pull of river current. A time delay fuse, essentially a small pencil-shaped device containing a chemical that slowly ate through a thin metal strip, gave the attackers hours to escape before detonation, the explosion itself roughly equivalent to a heavy artillery shell going off below the waterline. 12 men were ultimately selected for the operation, designated Operation Frankton, each pair given a code name drawn from sea creatures: catfish, crayfish, conger, cuttlefish, coalfish, and cachalot. They launched from the submarine HMS Tuna at the mouth of the Gironde on the night of the 7th of December, 1942. Disaster struck almost immediately. Cachalot's canvas hull was torn on the submarine's torpedo hatch before it could even enter the water, eliminating 2 men before the mission had properly begun. Coalfish capsized in the first of the estuary's brutal tidal races, drowning its crew within sight of the others. Conger overturned in the same stretch of water. Its 2 occupants, Marine Sheard and Marine Moffat, clung to the surviving canoes for as long as possible before being released to swim for shore, where they later died of hypothermia. Of the 6 canoes that set out, only catfish, crayfish, and cuttlefish remained, and Cuttlefish's crew, Corporal Laver and Marine Mills, would be captured by French police within days and handed to the Germans. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe genuinely helps the channel keep making this kind of detailed military history. That left only 4 men, Hasler and Sparks in catfish, McKinnon and Conway in crayfish, to continue the mission alone. For 3 nights they paddled upriver under cover of darkness, hiding among reed banks and beneath overhanging riverside vegetation during daylight, watching German patrol boats and barges pass close enough to hear voices. On the night of the 11th of December, they finally reached the docks of Bordeaux itself. Moving silently between moored vessels, they fixed their limpet mines to the hulls of merchant ships, working in freezing water within meters of armed sentries, before slipping back downriver before dawn. The mines began detonating the following day, sending Bordeaux's harbour authorities into confusion as ships began taking on water with no visible cause. German records remain incomplete about the exact sequence, but the documented result was 6 enemy vessels damaged. One of them, the blockade runner Tannenfels, hit badly enough to be put out of action for the remainder of the war. Adolf Hitler, on hearing how a handful of men in what he reportedly dismissed as a child's boat had penetrated his Atlantic defences, was said to be incandescent with rage and ordered immediate countermeasures including new harbour booms and tightened security across French ports. No other nation fielded anything quite like Operation Frankton during the war, though Italy had effectively pioneered the underlying concept. Italian naval saboteurs achieved remarkable results with their own combination of manned torpedoes and combat swimmers, most famously at Alexandria, but their operations relied on dedicated underwater delivery vehicles and trained naval frogmen, rather than simple folding canoes paddled on the surface. Germany, by contrast, never developed an equivalent raiding capability of its own design, relying instead on conventional naval forces and coastal defence to protect its harbours, which is precisely why Bordeaux's defenders never anticipated an attack arriving by kayak. The closest American parallel would come later in the war, with the development of underwater demolition teams, combat swimmers trained to clear obstacles ahead of amphibious landings. But these units were built around large-scale beach assaults, rather than the kind of small, deniable sabotage raid Hasler's men carried out. In terms of sheer audacity relative to resources committed, Frankton stands almost alone. 12 men and 6 folding boats, set against 32 German warships, and a heavily fortified port, achieving measurable strategic damage at a fraction of the cost of a single bombing raid. The operation's influence proved lasting. Lessons drawn from Frankton's failures, particularly the catastrophic losses in the estuary's tidal races, fed directly into the training and equipment of what would eventually become the Special Boat Service, Britain's premier maritime special forces unit, which traces its lineage directly back to Hasler's original detachment. The material damage inflicted by Operation Frankton was real but modest. 6 ships disabled or damaged is a meaningful tactical result, yet it pales against the scale of Bordeaux's overall shipping traffic. The true impact of the raid lay elsewhere, in the psychological shockwave it sent through German occupation forces along the entire French coastline. If men could paddle 60 miles up a heavily patrolled river in canvas boats and strike at the very heart of a fortified harbour, then no port, however distant from the sea, could be considered truly safe. German forces poured resources into new harbour defences, anti-infiltration booms, and patrol routines across occupied France, resources diverted from elsewhere precisely because of what 4 men in 2 small boats had proven possible. The human cost was severe and disproportionate to the 8 men who carried out the actual mission. Of the 10 who launched that first night, only Hassler and Sparks ultimately survived the war, escaping overland through occupied France into neutral Spain with the help of the French resistance, a journey that took weeks and demanded enormous physical endurance on top of the raid itself. Mackinnon and Conway, the second pair who had reached Bordeaux and helped carry out the attack, were captured attempting their own escape and executed by the Germans in March 1943, under Hitler's notorious Commando order, which decreed that captured Allied commandos be shot rather than treated as prisoners of war. Winston Churchill later credited the raid with helping shorten the war, though such claims are difficult to verify with precision, and historians today are careful to describe Frankton's impact in terms of morale and deterrence, rather than decisive military outcome. What is beyond dispute is the example it set. The operation became a foundational case study in what small, highly trained units could achieve against targets conventional forces could not touch, a template later echoed in countless special forces operations through the rest of the war and beyond. Surviving examples of the Cockle Mark II canoe can still be seen today, including one preserved at the Combined Military Services Museum, a fragile wood and canvas reminder of just how little equipment stood between these men and catastrophe. Return for a moment to that first night on the Gironde, 10 men in 6 canoes vanishing into darkness with 60 miles of enemy water ahead of them. By the time the mission reached Bordeaux, that number had fallen to 4. By the time the war ended, it had fallen to 2. This is the arithmetic of Operation Frankton, and it is brutal. 6 boats became 3, 3 became 2, 12 men became 4, and 4 became 2 survivors. Mackinnon and Conway, paying for their courage with their lives months after the explosives they had planted, had already done their work. And yet within that arithmetic of loss lies the operation's true achievement. 4 men did what an entire bombing campaign could not safely attempt. 4 men slipped past 32 warships, 3 days of concealment in freezing reed beds, and the constant threat of discovery, to strike at the very centre of occupied France's most valuable Atlantic port. They carried no air support, no naval escort, nothing but paddles, mines, and an almost unimaginable degree of nerve. When the explosions finally came, scattered across the harbour and confusing German authorities, who could not immediately explain what had happened, those 4 men were already paddling back downriver into the dark, beginning an escape that would ultimately claim the lives of half of them. Operation Frankton did not win the war. No single raid does. But it proves something the Allies badly needed proving in the dark winter of 1942. At a time when victories were scarce and German confidence in its occupied territories remained largely unshaken. It proved that no harbour was beyond reach, no defence so complete that a handful of determined men could not find a way through it. It proved that courage, applied with sufficient skill and discipline, could achieve what entire squadrons of bombers could not safely attempt. Hitler's fury at being beaten by what he called a child's boat was not merely personal embarrassment. It was the recognition, however reluctant, that his Atlantic fortress had a crack running straight through it, 4 men wide and 60 miles long. The Cockleshell heroes, as they would come to be known, paid an extraordinary price for that crack. Their story endures precisely because so few of them lived to tell it themselves.